Great, thanks, Craig. I'll just click the got it button. So thank you, everyone. So today we'll be talking about MVP. It's not what you think it is. This is the Agile Brisbane meetup from the 25th of May. So what I'd like to do now is to have a look at just to introduce you to the two speakers. So Craig and myself are going to be taking you through the material today. So I'll be running through the slides and drawing on Craig's vast experience of knowledge to supplement what I have to present to you today. And yeah, thank you for co-doing this with me.
Which is basically code for John did all the work and I just turn up and answer any
Well, you know what they say. It's not about the amount of effort. It's about knowing exactly where to apply that effort, and your knowledge vastly exceeds mine in that area. So the two of us, I'm an Agile evangelist. I've been an Agile evangelist for many years now. I've been a project manager for most of my career and have a technical background. And I'd like to characterize Craig as an Agile thought leader, because he's really shaped the conversation, I think, around in a lot of the Agile community, I think, through the Agile revolution, and one of our co-founders of this group. So I'm very, very humbled to be sharing the podium with Craig on this one. What I'd like to do now is perhaps just to gauge from the group the level of expertise that we have with respect to the concept of MVP. So, and what I can do, what we can do is we can tailor the conversation to be more focused on the sort of what is MVP part of things, which is more of a beginner to the concept point of view, or should we focus more on the advanced side, where we start asking some of the really tough questions around MVP and how we would apply those to our initiatives that we're involved in. So I wonder if we can perhaps do it by show of hands to say who would like to this to be more focused on the explaining what it is point of view. Okay, so we got David, and don't be shy to put up your hand if you perhaps know what MVP is, but you just want to have more of an understanding of the definition of what it is anyway. And then, so okay, so we got two. And then if we can have a show of hands on the really tackling the more advanced side of things, of the tough questions around MVP. Okay, so we got 4. So it's about a 1 to 5. So it's about a 1 to, so it's about double. Okay, so that gives us a good indication. Thank you. So to move then to the next bit, what I wanted to do is to cover a little bit around the etymology. So this is perhaps more of an introduction to MVP as to what it is. And sorry, Magnus, you got your hand up. Is that a question, or is that because of the previous exercise? Okay. So the etymology is about looking at where the word comes from. And there's 2 names that really come out for me in that. The one is looking at Frank Robinson, and then more recently, Ries. So what I'll do here is to describe really the different angles they're coming to MVP from. So Frank Robinson, he introduced this back in 2001 as part of his SyncDev methodology. So we've got to cast our eyes back to 2001, is where people were trying to introduce waterfall to a large extent. I think that the Agile Manifesto had just been, I think it was coined after that, or it was around about the same time. So it was at the inception of Agile. And what they were trying to do is to get over this concept that they had at that time, where I think they were starting to measure things by lines of code as being a key measure, and a number of features and all that sort of thing. And people say, oh, my product is much better than yours because we've got 100 features. And I think it took the design revolution for us to move away from that. If you think of the difference between why the Newton didn't succeed as a PDA and why the Apple iPhone did, is to a large extent because of the focus that if you had a list of features, at that time it was about having a checklist where there was this understanding that when people bought something, they'd have their own little checklist at home and they'd tick off the items that were in the shop and they'd say, this one has more ticks, therefore that's what I'm going to buy. And it took Frank Robinson to introduce the idea to say that's the wrong way of looking at it. That in order to be successful, you need to really be focused on this risk return analysis to say, when you use this thing, are you, or the product of what you're producing, are you doing it in such a way that you are able to get enough of a return to justify the investment that you're putting in to build it? And I think when a lot of people use MVP today, they're using it in the context of this particular definition to say MVP is that minimum thing that you're producing that allows you to have enough of a return on investment that you remain viable. And one revolutionary thing about what Frank introduced as well is to say you don't try and build the whole elephant in one go. You build the smallest thing that's viable, and then you expand from there. So that was really revolutionary for its time. His key principles then mirrored that. And when we read through these today, we look back and say, well, these are really obvious. That these are things that you know, for example, ask questions and take notes. And it's very easy to forget that at the time that this was introduced, it was revolutionary because it wasn't applied. In those days, the idea of doing work was that you built something and then you threw it over the fence, and then or at least you thought of something, you put your idea down on paper, you threw it over the fence, and somebody else would go and do the next bit, and then you carry on going. So the whole idea of asking questions and taking notes and meet on site and all that sort of thing was a whole new thing. The other MVP idea that came through was the one around that was introduced by Ries in his book, The Lean Startup, which really turned the concept on its head. Now, Eric's idea of MVP is not the same as Frank Robinson's. So his idea is that you go and your process of developing a solution is a series of decisions, and looking at those being mostly directional, or being able to identify directional decisions, and the extent to which you're able to influence the outcome is what your decision velocity is. So if you can make a certain number of a larger number of meaningful decisions over a shorter space of time, then you're a better your product development is going to be more effective because you're able to establish a much better market fit. So his whole idea of MVP was then to say, can you build something that allows you to validate an assumption that you've made? And then once you have that assumption validated, you can then build something that's more refined, and eventually you get really good market fit. And then you're able to then have something that scales up from there. So using tools like A/B testing, for example, to confirm the hypothesis, you incorporate the result in the product, and then you rinse and repeat through all of your decisions that you have until such time as you are then able to scale up. Some examples of where that's been applied is Airbnb. So what Airbnb have done is they've said that we have this idea of allowing people to compete with hotels by renting out their own apartments, or having a kind of apartment sharing. So how did they go about that? Did they go and get millions of people to go and a big marketing campaign to get people to put all of their houses up into a website and then go and see if the market was there and so on? No, what they did is they took their own apartment, they put a listing of one, advertised it heavily, and then that proved the viability of whether people were willing to take them up on their own one. With Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he started buying books from distributors and giving them to the customers every time they ordered a book. And similarly with AdWorks, Groupon, and Zappos. Zappos is quite an interesting one, because what he actually did is he had a shoe shop across the way from his apartment, so he could actually see the shoe shop. He went across to the shoe shop, took pictures of all the shoes, put them up on a website. When people ordered them, Then he quickly ran down to the shoe shop, bought those shoes, put them in a box, and then sent them to the customer. So that's a way of achieving Eric Ries's MVP approach, because the hypothesis was validated. He was able to establish the market size, and then on the basis of that, he was able to know that if he scaled this, then he knew where the profitability lay. So what I'll do is, I'm not sure if any of you have seen this particular clip before. It's one that I've used in a previous talk, but I think it's such a classic to demonstrate the concept of an MVP solution in Seinfeld. So perhaps hands up who've seen them before, this one before. Have we got a, yeah, Craig has, because he went to that. Okay, so, and that's great. So most of you haven't seen it.
You need to turn on sound, John. You got no sound. No sound.
Sorry, is there no sound?
Yeah, the video's not playing with any sound.
Oh,
Might have to share with sound.
Yeah, the sound, yeah.
okay, let me take it back. I'll take it back to here. I'll put the stop. Let me see how I share with sound. Apologies. Let me see where the share button is.
Go to your more menu, and you should have a share of sound on that reshare, and click the sound button.
Share sound. There we go. Okay, I'll try again.
When I went to see Channel with Jerry. With Jerry, huh? With Jerry. Great. Great. Probably went to the 84th Street. That's where I always go with Jerry.
Hello, and welcome to Movie Phone. If you know the name of the movie you'd like to see, press 1.
Come on, come on.
Using your touch-tone keypad, please enter the first 3 letters of the movie title now. You've selected Agent Zero. If that's correct, press 1.
What?
You've selected Brown-Eyed Girl. If this is correct, press 1. Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you selected?
Channel?
To find the theater nearest you, please enter your 5-digit zip code now. Why don't you just tell me where you want to see the movie?
Lowe's Paragon, 84th and Broadway?
Channel is playing at the Paragon 84th Street Cinema in the main theater at 9:30 p.m.
Yeah, now I got you.
It's also playing in theater number 2 at 9 o'clock.
Hi. 3 for...
Sorry, let me go to the next slide. Okay, so what that gives you is an idea of MVP in action. So there, if you look at the cost of putting something like that together, as long as it was wrapped around, in Eric Ries's terms, it wrapped around an actual experimental framework that you're able to collect data from, that you can then validate your assumptions. So in a sense, that gives us different interpretations of what the word MVP means. So I think we end up in a situation in business where the word MVP is used, but it has different meanings for different people. In the case of Eric Ries, you're talking about validating a hypothesis, but there's also another level, which is the applying that to a startup, and then there's a general solution. So those are the 3 levels that I'd like to take you through now. So the first one, in terms of validating a hypothesis, is related to the Eric Ries situation I spoke about earlier, where you look at the process of solution development as primarily a series of key decisions on the path to the product to establish an acceptable level of market fit. He also focused on MVP being about validating hypothesis, but not delivering the fully sustainable end-to-end solution. So that's a key difference there. And also his solutions are not necessarily economically viable or scalable. Now, you'd have noticed from that clip that I played is that in that case, the MVP is not to, you can't apply it to 1,000 people because Kramer couldn't pick up 1,000 calls in one go. Airbnb only had one apartment that they could use. So not scalable, but enough for them to be able to say, yes, there's a market and this is what we need to do to achieve market fit. The next one, the next level that I've got here is the startup level. So this is where you have a series of hypotheses that you'd use to get to a point where you have enough understanding to be able to deliver something that has a viable business case. And that's where you say something that's ready for you to scale up. And that is also being used as a definition of MVP, is to say a series of experiments that you that allow you to arrive at a position where you say, this is the minimum viable business case delivering product, if that makes sense. Then what you do is you build and deliver that solution, and then you evolve the solution from that point onwards. So that's the second level that I've got. And then the third level is the general solution. So this is where in the projects that I've been involved in and initiatives, this is probably the use of the term that I found used most often when people refer to MVP. That what they say is that it's used to where generally you would go through an exercise where you get all the requirements that the team would like to deliver in the solution. You then apply a Moscow to that. You then pick the M's. So is everyone familiar with the concept of Moscow? Okay, let me explain Moscow. Great, thanks, Bernadette. So I think we've got most are giving thumbs up. But there are a couple that don't have thumbs up, so I'll just very quickly explain what that is. So Moscow is just an acronym, which the M is for must-haves. So a must-have is saying, if you don't have this thing in your solution, then you might as well not have the solution at all. The should-haves is saying, these are things that you would expect the solution to have those things. If they're not there, it's seriously degraded. You can still operate, but it's not going to be perfect. Could-haves are ones that you say it would enhance your business case, but that it's not central to what you're delivering. And then won't haves is the ones where you say we've made a decision and that's we're not going to do that because building that thing is not going to justify the effort that would be required to put into that. So that's where Moscow comes from, is the MSCW. You just put 2 O's in between there and you have the word Moscow. So what I've found is where people generally refer to MVP, they're referring to it as the M in Moscow. And the challenge that we have with this approach, and I found this a number of times, is that companies will go through the process where they say, well, we'd like to have a new solution. So in order to get the solution, they'll collect everything that everyone thinks should be in the solution. And they'll build up a backlog of user stories, or they'll build up a backlog of requirements, whatever it is. And then they will have a look at that and say, okay, so we don't have enough money to do all of these things. And then there's a whole argy-bargy about saying, well, what is the minimum we can get away with? And normally that means that you have to build something just with the M's. And then that becomes the scope of what it is that you need to deliver. And all of the other ones then become the rest, and that M then that's referred to as the MVP. So Ash, you've got your hand up?
Yep, just a question here. Regarding the general solution that you've got up on here and using the Moscow framework, I guess my issue with this is that it's not tied to any dollar value in the business case. You can have must-haves that are, say, compliance, legislation, other areas like that, qualities of the system, non-functional requirements, etc. But they don't necessarily have any tie into the business case. So once the solution goes live and you see dollars flowing through the system, if you follow this with the M's of Moscow, it doesn't necessarily cover the aspects of what contributes to those dollars.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point, because and I think that comes back to the original Robinson view of MVP, is that he was saying that MVP is that which has the minimum product that has the best business case. And I think that's where the dollars were brought into that original interpretation. And where that comes into this is saying that if you that the M in Moscow is to say that you can't deliver anything at all if you don't have the M's. And I think that's divorced from the business case. A lot of those high value stories would normally be part of the should have. So in other words, saying we can still go live with the if we just had the M's, but we're not going to reach the level of profitability that we'd like to achieve, or we aren't able to address the business case fully. And then the should haves come in to say that those provide the additional things that allow you to get to that business case.
Yeah,
so that's my
absolutely.
understanding of how it's been applied.
Yeah, so it could be that, you know, instead of just taking simply the M's in the requirements list, for instance, it could be mapped to what has the highest business value, highest. It doesn't necessarily have to be the M's.
Yes.
I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know fully, but
yes. No. And look, it's a really, really important question. So what I'd like you to do is to hold on to that question, because I'd like to go into an exercise now. And then I think let's bring that into the post-exercise discussion, because I think we really need to revisit that one before the end of today.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. So the next slide that I've got here is really the exercise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a mirror board that we've set up. And I think, Craig, if I grab this URL here and I pop it in the chat, is that, I imagine everyone can jump onto that. So let me see if I can go back. I wonder if you, let me just see if I can get to the chat here so I can pop it in. There we go. Chat. I'll pop in the URL. So is everyone able to join the mirror chat, the mirror board? And we got a comment from Leah there. I believe the best place to start with most value is to look at the M within that bucket. Yeah, that's a good point, Leah. Okay, so we got a couple of people coming in. Has anyone got any difficulty getting into that mirror? Cool. So we got 3 people in there. 4. So I think, okay, while we're going in, I just wanted to ask if everyone's familiar with using Miro, or do I need to give a quick view on can anyone do a thumbs down if you need a quick Miro refresher on how to use Miro? Okay, it looks like everyone's got everyone knows how to use Miro. So what I'd like you to do at the beginning is, and this is, you're probably wondering why we set up the name of, or at least, sorry, the picture that we used for this event was somebody brushing their teeth. And I'm sure you were wondering why we chose that picture. And the reason is that the activity that I'd like us to do first, and I'll put a timer on this, is for everyone to think about a situation where you wake up one morning and you need to get to work. So what you would do is you capture all of the activities that you would do on a normal day in getting to the office. And this is, when I say get to work, I'm not talking about the remote situation that we have now. If we cast our eyes back to the distant primordial past where we all used to go into the office, and or maybe just if this is an office day that you need to be in the office, and what are the things that you do from the moment that your eyes open in the morning until such time as you get there. So if we can each grab however many tickets you want, let's capture those activities in those ones there. And you're welcome to add more more post-it notes for that. But ultimately, we want to get a sense of all of the things that you would do from waking up until you are sitting at your desk at the office. So has anyone got any questions on that objective of what we're doing right now? I might put a timer on that. Let's see, where's the timer?
You may not have access to that, John. I might need to do it for you. What time do you want?
No. Okay. I think let's give this one, say, 3 minutes, maybe 3 more minutes. And I see some people they're quite familiar with journey maps. So we're already doing step 2 there, which is to put them in a sequence. So that's the journey map at the bottom. But so the top one is really to identify any activities that you would do in the morning. So you wake up in the morning and you are getting ready for work. So the sort of things that you can see there already, we've got get wallet, grab laptop, shower, breakfast and coffee times in, check the weather. You're thinking about maybe the transport options, like, do you go by car? Do you take the train? What about the, filling up with petrol on the way? I should probably lock this down. Sorry, let me just put a little lock on this. Let me see if I can it looks like I don't have access to locking. I don't know, Craig, if you want to lock the frames, if you're able to.
Yep, doing it now.
Cool. So I know some people like to put on the TV in the morning and watch a bit of news, or have it on the smartphone. Check social media. I don't know if that's something that you'd do. Breakfast. Have we got breakfast in there? Yeah, we've got breakfast and coffee. So there's 1 minute, 14 seconds left. Okay, it's another 50 odd seconds left. Think of all the things that you do in the morning. If you have kids, you might need to drop the kids off at school, daycare. Right, last 25 seconds. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and time. Okay, so the next exercise, and I'm really pleased that people have already had a jump start on that, is to prepare the user journey for this. So in this exercise, what we're going to do, and I think we can give it another 3 minutes for that, is just to sort these in an order. So in other words, on the left-hand side, put in the things that you do from the moment you wake up, and on the right-hand side, the things that you do as you arrive in the office, and then in between, all the things that you do to get from the left to the right. So I imagine that a lot of you would have done this journey mapping type of exercise before. So and you're free to stretch it out a little bit. So if you pop all of those in there, I think, Craig, can you put another 3 minutes on that? I think, is everyone comfortable with 3 minutes being enough time for this? Cool. So it's just sorting it in the order. No, we got milestones as well. That's really good. I like it. That's SP. So I can see Sheetal that you've run a few projects before. Okay, we got
Somebody will buy a paper. What is that?
Yeah, we've heard about those things. That's PC, isn't it? Pre-COVID.
Pre-2000, isn't it?
All right, 1 minute left, but I think we can probably, I think we're probably there. So is everyone comfortable that we've got enough in there to, I don't think there's any more from the top, so we can probably end the timer there. Cool. So now the next thing that I want to do is to look at MVP1. So what I'm going to do here is make can I ask that everyone goes to tickets? And now what I've done is I've added a set of labels next to each of those. So you got the Moscow there. You've got must have, could have, should have, and won't have. So if you imagine that we are now going through this exercise, that this is your initiative that you need to deliver. And we now need to go through an exercise of saying, we need to identify what the M is in Moscow. And the way to do that is to go through and identify with each of these, which one of those are they? Is it M for must have? Is it should haves, could haves, or won't haves? So each ticket should have one label on it to say which one of those it is.
For those who aren't sure, in Miro, when you click on a sticky note, there's a little menu item that pops up, and there's a little tag, looks like a ticket, and there you can choose the label.
Yep. So I don't know if you want to give it 3 minutes again, Craig. So if you think about your morning process to say, well, what must you have in your morning process and getting to work? If you don't have that, then that's going to be it's going to be an issue for you getting to work. That okay, so it looks like we got about half of them. We got some with two things, like we got a could have and a should have on this one. So I'm probably gonna, let's say with these ones that have got two in there, we probably need to take one of them away. Like we shouldn't have something that's both must haves and should have. So I'll probably just take the one out. This one here, we could probably take out that one. So if there's two, I'll defer to the higher one. Okay, so 1 minute left. I think we've got about 10 that we still need to define. So we got shine, get dressed. We've covered that one. Check weather. Okay, so it's probably about 3. I think this one was a must-have, so that's a must-have. There. All right, I think that should be all of them. Cool. All right, so now I think we can probably end the timer there, Craig. I think we've got all of them. So if we take the must-haves, what I'll do is I'll just make a copy of the must-haves. I don't know if, are we able to select multiple? No, are we? Looks like we can't. So what I'll do is I'll just copy those across to here. So all the M's, I want to make a copy of and just bring it down to the bottom. So we grab that, grab bag, grab laptop, and we've got this one. That one's the M there. Oh, there must be multiple ones there because there's definitely a red there. Have shower, there we go. And this one, I've already got that one, and you got the catch train. Okay, good. So this is the M's. So what we've got is so normally what happens in a project that I found is that when you go through the Moscow analysis, then this is what the company would have gone through the process of to get to this stage where we say, this then is the MVP, and this is what we need to deliver. Are there any thoughts on the relationship between the user journey map and the MVP one that we've got so far?
Cool. There's a lot of differences in the sequencing.
Yeah, I think the sequencing we can work through, but I think the whole idea is that this is the way that normally where the process ends. So when working with MVP with customers, we say we've gone through the Moscow, we've worked out that these are the essential things that we need to have in place, and that's what we need to work with. Now, what I want to do is I want to say that there's actually a further MVP that we need to consider, which is why I've left the space at the bottom here for what I call MVP2. And what I'd like to do is to have an exercise that we can also run for 3 minutes, is to say, okay, so what's happened now is on a particular day, you have a very important meeting with your CEO, and this is critical to your career that you're there. And you've just realized that the alarm clock never went off. You've woken up, you look at your watch or your phone for the time, and while you're lying in bed trying to open your eyes, you realize that it's that you have to be at the meeting in half an hour's time, and you know that most of that time is going to be taken up by the actual travel to get there, and it's very much in doubt as whether you've got enough time. You're going to be late anyway, but the trick is to minimize the amount of late time that you're going to be. So MVP2 is to say, and you don't need to use these specific stories, but the question to everyone is, what are the things that you would need to do in order for you to be able to minimize the lateness that you would be at that meeting? Because every second that you're late to the meeting means that you are going to be it's going to have an impact on your career. So if we look at pooping and peeing, is that something that you'd even be considering at that time? I'm just thinking that if you remember that you wake up and you suddenly have this wash of realization that comes over you and saying, your whole career is based on you being at this meeting, which is going to be significantly impaired if you're not there, because you've been building up for this moment, for this particular meeting. It's critical that you're there. You wake up, and what do you need to do to rush to get there on time? Do you need to poop and pee? So that's the question. And also with that, getting dressed, yes, you need to get dressed, but do you need to get the same dressed as you had in this MVP in the top? Or is it a case of instead of browsing through the cupboard to find the specific clothes that you've got, is there a minimal version of getting dressed that's different to the getting dressed that you would do if you're building the whole getting dressed feature, if that makes sense? What are the key things that you would do to get there? So these are the things that you'd put in here. And I think, Craig, if you can perhaps put the timer on for, I think 3 minutes on that one. Actually, make it 2 minutes. Sorry, Craig, have you got the timer there? I think maybe if we leave 1 more minute for the team. Okay, I think we might have lost Craig for a bit. All right. So I think that should give us an idea that what we've got in the MVP2 is not the same as MVP1, that the two are quite different to each other. And the issue here is, the key here is to say that an MVP is not necessarily something that's sustainable in the long term. If you had to do this every single day, it wouldn't work. But it's a minimal set of features that allows you to have end-to-end viability. So what I'll do is maybe close move away from the mirror board. Perhaps just to throw the question open to the floor, is that, are there any observations on what you've noticed that's different between these two?
Looking for alternatives. So yesterday's clothes, extra deodorant, taxi instead of train, for example.
Yeah. Ash, you got your hand up?
Yep. So a couple of differences that I'm seeing, and I think this applies to MVP in general and having different levels. Number one, the goal obviously will be different. Number two, the persona will be different. If you look at MVP and minimal viable product, the viableness, viable for whom, and that's where that persona comes into it as well. So those are two differences right there between these MVP1 and MVP2.
Absolutely. So MVP2, the viability is suddenly brought into sharp contrast because of the need to get to a particular milestone a lot quicker than you would have had on MVP1.
Yep.
So that's the key difference between the two. Or one of the key differences. Any other observations?
Okay. I guess must-haves, excuse me, must-haves are relative.
Yes, absolutely. So what I'd like to do is to move away from from this board and go back to the presentation. So if I can then go to the next slide and say, so why is this important? why did I raise this as a point to differentiate between those two? And the reason why I wanted to do that is to really describe that as a de-risking mechanism in the project, in your whatever it is that you're delivering. It's a key way to de-risk. And what I'd like to do at the last part of this section is also to look at the key discussion points around this. So from a de-risking point of view, the first point that I'd like to raise is that there's unanticipated use. That when you build something, you're building it based on a set of assumptions that are probably quite reasonable, but don't follow through in practice. So in the example of here is that eBay, the first item that was sold on it, the first ever item was a broken laser printer. And then they phoned the guy up and they said, hey, did you know that it was broken? And he said, yeah, I collect broken laser pointers. That's what he does, he collects them. So people will use the products of whatever you're producing in totally different ways to what you expect them to be used. You think that the key feature, whether the fact that users must press a button and then all of a sudden that key press is propagated to all of the people involved in the chat, you might think that's the most important thing that you need to spend all of your engineering time on. But then when you actually find that you get the actual product, no one uses it and it's not important to them. Or in the case of Google Glass, your key feature is something that causes people not to use your product. So de-risking means that by building something as early on as possible and making it available to people, you are able to very quickly test that in the market. So the second part of this is if you think of having an idea of that you need to build a picture, there's different ways in which you can achieve that end result. In the top case that you have at the top here, you only have a viable product when you get to the end because of the way in which you construct it. If you start with a definition of MVP, which is really, really an early version, then if on your initiative you run into problems where it takes longer than expected because you have a lot of impacts or the business priorities change, you can still go live with the version before the final one because it still meets that, and to Ash's point, it meets that business case. It meets the persona is able to make use of it, or at least a sizable set of the personas that you have. So two key ways in which that's de-risked. Can anybody else think of any other benefits of applying the early MVP, or at least applying an approach where you identify the minimalist MVP before you do the M in Moscow MVP? So Craig, this was where I might sorry. Yep. Sheetal? Sorry, Sheetal, I think I interrupted you. Sorry, someone was saying something. Did I miss that? Okay, might be a separate conversation. So any further thoughts on other advantages of those two definitions of MVP or two levels of MVP? Okay, I'll probably move to the next slide then. And so in this one, I'm looking at some key using the last bit of the discussion to really cover these key topics, and I'll probably throw the floor open to discuss any of them because we've got limited time left. As to say, the first one is looking at the creating a hypothesis culture. The next one is looking at the brand impact of having a less than perfect solution and strategies to mitigate. So this is where, for example, if you delivered a solution that doesn't represent perfection, what impact's that going to have on your brand, and is there a way of mitigating that? The third one is to say, can you use MVP with legacy systems replacement where you can't reduce the service levels of the system that you're replacing? And then also the question around the efficiency of delivery versus solution fit. And then, of course, I think the fifth one that we should add is Ash's point around looking at the extent to which the business case finds its way into MVP as opposed to it just being a must-have, as in the solution's not viable without that thing. So those are really the five topics of conversation. So I'll open the floor to discussing any of those that anyone wants to discuss. So over to you.
Hi, John, it's Bern. Just a
Hi,
couple
Bern.
of just a couple of items there in the chat from Liat and Sheetal, which I think form some of that information around your key questions and discussion points. Certainly the less waste and that sense of prioritization. You know, what do we actually really have to have in your example there around, you know, what do you have to do to only do the necessary to get to work? Interesting, the different opinions, if you like. And again, that's where it comes into the conversation of prioritization. What is really necessary? And negotiation with each of those different personas. What's important to one may not be important to another. And a discussion point around, is it truly necessary?
Yes, absolutely. And I guess the MVP part looks at saying, where do you draw the line between, if we can't have this one feature, we can't do anything, or this one story, or this one bit of the solution we're putting together, that how do we draw that line?
Indeed, and certainly from experience, from my perspective, it is literally working and collaborating, trying to understand the thoughts from each of those personas, getting them together and really mapping it out. Is it truly that important? And if it is, then it's an MVP.
Yes.
It's an M.
Yep. Yeah, and how do you determine that importance? Because the other thing is knowing that you're going to get to that at the end of your engagement is perhaps different to knowing whether you need to get to that at your first milestone, and what do you use that first milestone for?
And sometimes, you know, what was a should have, which has been sort of put to the side, sometimes comes back in because you can't do one without the other.
Yes. So understanding the dependency between those. And the other thing is, part of that is that you wouldn't necessarily have to deliver the whole feature that it's dependent on, but only the part that is dependent.
Yes.
And the ability to slice it at that time to achieve that. Because I think to a certain extent, it's probably lazy to say this feature is dependent on that one, so we have to do the whole of that thing it's dependent on in order for us to develop the downstream one. And that you lose an opportunity there to scale back on that effort.
And again, that comes back to that MVP 1 and MVP 2. You know, how much of it do you actually have to do? What is truly necessary?
Yes. Ash, you've got your hand up?
Yep. Can I ask a question? This might muddy the waters a little bit. I don't know. The very first point of creating a hypothesis culture, how is this different from, say, a proof of concept, which also tests a hypothesis and sees if it works? You know, is proving a concept essentially. So how is this different from that?
Yes. So I would, the way that I see it is hypothesis culture probably looks at more of the David Bland flavor of being able to, when you're putting a business model canvas together, to say, what assumptions have you used to construct that business model canvas? And then being able to say, to call out those things and say, if I go and build this thing, is it going to achieve the market penetration or whatever it is that your goal is that you thought it was going to do? And where are the unknowns that allow you to validate whether you can get there or not? And then what experiments can you do that can allow you to determine whether you were hitting the right mark, whether you had the right understanding, or is it just because you've got personal biases or you've got or that you've gained a perception about the way the world is that might be different to the way the world actually is. So many assumptions have been made and products have failed because of some key assumptions that when you go out and you scale the thing, then it just doesn't work. People don't like it. So it's identifying those up front and then building something really small that can verify whether that is the case. So if you embed that in your culture, it means that you are able to have established your fit for whatever it is you're producing well before you've spent, $10 million, whatever it is, building the big thing. They say build it and they'll come. That's not always necessarily the case.
It's not an easy thing though. That's one of the challenges, to have that kind of hypothesis culture as you've got in point one, to ingrain that within the team is not an easy task.
No, it's not. But I'm seeing it as a DNA, a cultural thing. It's a DNA thing. That if you have a culture whereby people are calling out those hypotheses and you have enough priority is given to going off and validating them, then it means that those organizations are going to achieve better fit for whatever they produce.
Yeah. I'll probably also add in that first point, hypothesis and learning culture. It's all about, MVPs are all about, finding out if there's differences or anything that we can make better for future iterations of the product or even MVP2. It doesn't have to be, but it's about learning of what you've tested out in that hypothesis.
Yeah, and doing it in a controlled way. So it's all very well going and doing something, but if you setting up the assumption beforehand and saying this will be proved if the following conditions happen, and then you do the experiment and then you see whether it matches what you'd expected, then you can draw a conclusion from that. And so therefore, we expect this to happen when you scale.
Yeah, sure.
Right, I see we have run a little bit over the time. I think we're 4 minutes over. So what we can do at this point is we can probably stop you can do the conclusion and stop the formal meeting, and then we can move to perhaps to more informal discussion. And you're welcome to continue on any of those points if you'd like to for a bit. Are there any